Howdy folks, it's the 4th week of June 2026, and welcome to This Week in the West. I'm Seth Spillman, broadcasting from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. On this podcast, we share stories of the people and events that shape the history, art, and culture of the American West, and those still shaping it today. So today's episode is about a 19th century German duke. Let's go ahead and address the obvious question: why would a German noble be on a podcast about the American West? Well, because as familiar as we are with explorers like Lewis and Clark, few people know about Duke Paul Wilhelm of Württemberg, a nature-loving, slightly rotund, mustachioed German duke who tromped his way through the American frontier in the 1820s and 30s. Born into European royalty, Paul Wilhelm could have lived a comfortable life in palaces. Instead, he became one of the earliest European scientific explorers to travel deep into the American frontier. Following in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark, he journeyed through the Mississippi and Missouri River valleys, traveled among indigenous tribes, collected scientific specimens, and documented the rapidly changing West. Why? He had a curiosity about science and a lust for adventure. His travels took him from the swamps of Louisiana to the Great Plains and all the way to the upper reaches of the Missouri River in present-day Montana. We remember him today on the week of his birth, June 25th, 1797. Born in what is now Poland, Paul Wilhelm was part of the powerful House of Württemberg and a nephew of the king. But unlike many European nobles, his mind was not on military glory or courtly luxuries, but on a fascination with the natural world. He studied under scholars influenced by the great naturalist Alexander von Humboldt, whose ideas inspired a generation of scientific explorers. When considering where to explore, his eyes turned across the Atlantic to the still wild United States of America. By the early 1820s, the American West represented one of the most mysterious and scientifically interesting regions on Earth. Much of the territory beyond the Mississippi River was still unfamiliar to Europeans. The Lewis and Clark expedition had returned less than 20 years earlier, and stories of vast grasslands, indigenous nations, strange wildlife, and immense rivers captured imaginations across Europe. In October 1822, Duke Paul Wilhelm sailed from Hamburg to North America. He arrived first in New Orleans, one of the most colorful and chaotic cities in the young United States. From there, he began traveling up the Mississippi River and its tributaries. He explored the Red River, the Yazoo River, and the Ohio River before eventually making his way to St. Louis, then considered the gateway to the American frontier. The Duke approached the West as a naturalist and ethnographer. He meticulously collected plant specimens, animal remains, and indigenous artifacts. He recorded detailed observations about geography, weather, and the cultures he encountered. One of the most fascinating stops on his journey was a tiny Louisiana settlement called La Belize, located near the mouth of the Mississippi River. At the time, La Belize was a fragile community built on wooden pilings above mud and marshland. The settlement existed primarily to guide ships safely through the dangerous Mississippi Delta into New Orleans. Wilhelm described the village vividly, writing that the few wooden houses, quote, stand in the midst of the water and slime between high reeds. He noted that residents traveled from one house to another on plank walkways suspended above the swamp. He also described the enormous alligators inhabiting the riverbanks, marveling at the sheer number of them lurking in the marshes. An engraving based on his drawings of La Belize survives today and offers a rare visual glimpse into a vanished frontier settlement. Hurricanes repeatedly destroyed the town over the years until it disappeared entirely. As he pushed farther west, the Duke entered the fur trade country along the Missouri River. There he met legendary American explorer William Clark, who had become superintendent of Indian Affairs in St. Louis after the Lewis and Clark expedition. Clark helped introduce the Duke to several important frontier figures, including Toussaint Charbonneau and Jean Baptiste Charbonneau, the son of Sacagawea. The Duke was fascinated by the young man. After traveling together in the West, Jean Baptiste eventually accompanied Paul Wilhelm back to Europe. For several years, the two journeyed together through Europe and North Africa, creating one of the strangest and most remarkable cultural pairings in frontier history. With Charbonneau serving as an interpreter, Paul Wilhelm spent months traveling through the upper Missouri River country. He visited trading forts and observed indigenous nations, including the Sioux, Blackfoot, and Mandan peoples. In 1829, he reached the Three Forks of the Missouri River in present-day Montana, becoming one of the earliest European explorers to document the area after Lewis and Clark. At a time when maps of the American West still contain enormous blank spaces, these journeys added meaningful scientific and geographic knowledge. But what makes Duke Paul Wilhelm especially interesting today is the way he documented indigenous cultures. Compared to many 19th century contemporaries, he showed genuine curiosity and respect toward the Native American nations he encountered. His journals contain detailed ethnological observations, descriptions of daily life, and records of languages, customs, clothing, and ceremonies. By the time many Americans became interested in preserving frontier history, countless details had already vanished. Paul Wilhelm's writings captured moments and places during a brief transitional era before railroads, large-scale settlement, and industrialization transformed the West forever. His travels did not end with America. Over the course of his life, the Duke explored parts of Mexico, Egypt, South America, Australia, and the Middle East. He amassed enormous collections of scientific specimens and filled journals with sketches, maps, and observations. Unfortunately, much of his collection and many of his unpublished writings were destroyed during World War II. What survives still reveals the astonishing scope of his curiosity and ambition. Duke Paul Wilhelm eventually returned to Germany, where he spent his later years organizing his collection and living at Mergentheim Palace. He died in 1860 at the age of 63. And with that, we say Auf Wiedersehen to another episode of This Week in the West. Our show is produced by Chase Spivey and written by Mike Kaler. Follow us and rate us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you hear us. That'll help us reach more people. Come visit us in Oklahoma City. You can now buy tickets online at thecowboy.org/tickets. Got a question or suggestion? Drop us an email at podcast@thecowboy.org. We leave you today with the words of the great explorer and naturalist Alexander von Humboldt, whose work inspired Duke Paul Wilhelm. The most dangerous worldview is the worldview of those who have not viewed the world. Much obliged for listening, and remember, come find your West here at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum.